The title of the piece is Kevin Durant Won't Leave the Warriors, but maybe he should. Andrew, good morning. How you doing?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing great, brother. Thanks so much for joining us. And like I said, I really enjoyed your piece because I think we exist in this really weird quasi-territory with Kevin Durant. If you want to see him leave, it's like you're not a real basketball fan. But if you want to see him leave, it would mean it's better for basketball. You kind of lead out and lay out the 10 reasons why. Would you like to see him leave this offseason?
I would, because I'm a Kevin Durant fan. I mean, first and foremost, I think that if you care about his career and how he's perceived and how he's remembered, I think that there is more of an upside for him if he went somewhere else and turned around and said, look, I went to Golden State because I wanted to play with smart basketball players and learn how to win and evolve personally and professionally. And I did that, and it was a great 2 years, and now I want another challenge. And if he did that, I don't think he ever would, because I think he would fear kind of the backlash and the way this move was perceived. But, like, so many people would immediately turn 180 degrees on Kevin Durant and get all the way back in. But where we are now, like you said, it's kind of just we're in a weird zone where everybody acknowledges that KD is a great player, but one of the reasons he went to Golden State is because he wanted to be the number one guy in the league and the guy that everyone loves and sort of take over the throne from LeBron. And that's not happening because I think most basketball fans kind of give this whole Warriors team the side eye right now because they're just so stacked that it's hard to appreciate what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a weird in-between world that we live in with these guys because obviously they're great and obviously they play a type of style we should love and appreciate. But because there's no drama involved, we kind of don't want to see it. And so basketball purists will say, well, you don't get basketball. You don't understand basketball. You touch on this in your piece. How annoying is it to hear that as the counter-argument to Kevin Durant?
Man, it's really tough. And I have it's definitely a take that is particularly prevalent in the media, and I argue with colleagues about it pretty frequently. Like, you can appreciate basketball, and I personally – my problem with the Warriors is that I do appreciate basketball, and I see now that, like, they can win getting a B-plus game from Steph Curry and a B-plus game from Durant. Like, they don't even have to play their best basketball to dominate everyone else. And I think if you're a basketball fan, you can watch these games and understand that that's what's happening in most of them, is that the Warriors really aren't maxing out the individual talents of any of these guys on a regular basis. I mean, you'll have a couple games here and there where they go off, but, like, for the most part, it's just kind of a bummer to watch. And so it definitely gets annoying when you hear people lecturing everyone about how you need to appreciate greatness, and the only people who are complaining are just, like, sad idiots who don't appreciate greatness. Like, that's just way off base. I appreciate greatness. I just want to see a little bit more competition. I think watching great players get pushed is the best part of sports.
Andrew Sharp joins us, Sports Illustrated, SI.com. And you touched on that in your piece, and you kind of touched on that also earlier in our conversation. Steph Curry's great. Kevin Durant's great. But when they play together, they are not pushed to their utmost degree. As you said, we're not watching Curry and Durant operate at the height of their powers. If they stay together, will we ever see that from those two guys, or just what Steph did before KD arrived?
Yeah, I think we may. I wouldn't write it off entirely, because if the roster gets too expensive over the next few years, or there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff with Golden State this year that I think David West and Sean Livingston and even Steve Kerr alluded to after the title. And some of that probably centered on Draymond Green, and some of it probably centered on KD, actually. But I think that if the chemistry gets weird and they end up shipping out Draymond, or Draymond wants too much money and they decide they don't want to pay him $180 or $200 million, like if it's just Steph and KD and one other guy, then I think the calculus changes a little bit, and we will see Durant and Curry have to do a little bit more, and that'll be fascinating too. I think that alone would be more interesting than what we've got right now. And also, you take Draymond out of that offense, and he facilitates basically half of what they do. And if it's Steph and KD running pick and rolls together, it gets a lot more interesting.
What do you think is the stories behind closed doors with the Warriors this year? As you mentioned, West and even Kerr and Livingston have alluded to, this was tough. This was the toughest. But what was it about KD? What was it about Kevin Durant that might have factored into the drama?
Well, I don't want to speculate too much. I will say, the most impressive part of all of this is that the Warriors didn't let on that there was anything going on behind the scenes for the duration of the season and the playoffs. I think they were very careful to say all the right things. And if you watched closely, you could tell that something was a little bit off. But I think there's kind of built-in challenges when you're going to the finals for a fourth straight year. And that's kind of apathy and a team that knows it doesn't really have to it's not going to be judged until May and June, so why try in March and February? And I think there was some of that, but I also think that the personalities behind the scenes were a little bit more difficult, and it went a little bit beyond the typical apathy and struggles that title teams face when they try to repeat. And that, I think, you've got some big personalities in that locker room. Draymond is one of them, and then Kevin Durant has always been kind of a little bit more sensitive than most superstars. So I think that played into it as well.
Andrew Sharp joins Sports Illustrated, SI.com, and SI's podcast, Open Floor, about the NBA. So does that make it sound to you like this is not necessarily tenable for the long term? I mean, they seem to play kumbaya together. They want to take less money to keep winning and all of this. But if there was already friction within that locker room this year, just year two of KD, should we imagine that this doesn't necessarily have a shelf life of another 6 to 8 years?
I think it's a safe bet that 6 to 8 years is probably longer than this is going to last, just because there's so many different things that can happen, and everything that looks great now can change over the next few years. And even when you look at the Bulls teams, the only people that stayed together through those 6 titles, it was Jordan and Pippen, and then there was turnover everywhere else, and things got different, and they kept winning because Jordan and Pippen were that good. So there's going to be changes. I would say that it's maybe wishful thinking to say that the adversity they dealt with this year is going to kind of snowball and turn into something bigger that tears this team apart, because winning solves so much. And I think the conversations around Durant and the Warriors were very different even 2 weeks ago after the Rockets series, when things kind of looked a little bit off. I mean, coming after that finals, Durant was dominant, the Warriors looked dominant again, and everybody seems pretty happy. So winning will solve most of this, and I think we are in for at least another title or maybe 2 for the Warriors before things really start to change.
Where's our best bet to have a challenger? Do you believe it's Boston? Do you believe it's wherever LeBron goes? Do you believe it's Houston?
You know what? I think it's going to be Boston. If you ask me to pick the next team to win a title other than the Warriors, I would take the Celtics. They are so well positioned, and they still have one more move to make for another superstar. And they're going to be really tough, man. I wouldn't sleep on them. And LeBron is going to make this summer really fun. I'm very curious to see where he lands. But it's going to be hard for him to go somewhere and build a team overnight that can take this Warriors team down. And by the time he does, it may take a year or two. By the time he does, I think the Celtics will be in even better position than he is to make a run at Golden State.
In your piece, you likened Kevin Durant joining the Warriors to Shaq joining the 96 Bulls, unlike LeBron joining Bosh and Dwayne Wade. How do you think history looks at Kevin Durant? I mean, he's winning. He's got NBA Finals MVPs. But is history going to look at it as a gravy train of sorts, as you mentioned, a Shaq on a 96 Bulls?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this shakes out. I think when he initially came to Golden State, most people in sports media remembered how we reacted to the LeBron in Miami and how crazy everyone went and how regrettable some of those like fiery opinions ended up being, because ultimately LeBron in Miami was a pretty cool thing, and some of those titles were very memorable and great, and so I think people wanted to avoid making that mistake with Durant in Golden State, and just sort of assumed that over time history would look kindly on his decision to join the Warriors. And I don't know if we're going to get all the way there. I think this is always going to be kind of a strange era in NBA history that was made possible by like an unprecedented spike in the salary cap, and it was just kind of bizarre. And it's strange to live through it now. I mean, the day after the finals, you could look at the NBA and say, well, the Warriors are going to win again next year too. So I don't know if history is going to ever like forgive him or celebrate this era. I think it's going to be more, this was strange, and he's a great player, but it wasn't very much fun to watch him succeed.